Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Stool podcast, a podcast for woodworkers and the maker community in general. This is episode number 13. My name is Robin Lewis from robinlewismakes.com. I'm joined by Joey Chalk from King Post Timberworks.
Hello.
And John Crawford from Periodic Furniture Studio.
Hello.
We live stream the recording on YouTube every Thursday evening at 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, or UTC plus 10, or you can watch or listen to it later on YouTube, iTunes, or SoundCloud. I want to say hello to everyone in the chat. We'll get to your comments and questions towards the end of the show, but feel free to chat amongst yourselves. The idea being that this is also a place for people to meet. Just got one announcement that I wanted to mention this week. A very big welcome to all the new subscribers that we got. We had a bit of a jump over this week, so welcome to everyone. I hope you enjoy the live show. And with that said, before we get on to this week's topic, let's do a rundown of what everyone's working on. So Joey, as per usual, you get to start.
Well, I was going to have a quick little announcement as well. I thought, now, I haven't talked to you at all about this, Robin, but so I had a few messages this week, 3 or 4 emails and comments and such from people all around the world, from Brazil and the UK, saying how much they enjoyed the podcast and good job, and which was awesome. But, as far as I know, we don't really have a good way of knowing how many people are listening or watching. Watching kind of, but we really don't know how many downloads people are making. And so if you're out there and you enjoy what we're doing, flick us a message and say great job or bad job. Either way, we'd like to hear from you guys, because as far as we're concerned, we're just kind of sitting here talking, and when we hang up, that's it. We don't hear any more feedback. So it's really good to get something back from the people who enjoy listening to our ramblings. So that's it. Right, what have I been working on? I've just started a ply kitchen, which has been going pretty good. Got quite a lot done this week. Just this afternoon, I started milling up some pencil cedar. I've never used it before. It's interesting. It smells like pencils. So I figure that's the timber they use to make pencils out of, which is why it's got its name.
That's a different cedar to...
Yeah, it's not Western red. It's quite a lot heavier. It's got a density slightly harder than pine, but it's way harder than cedar. It's got a much finer grain. It's not as open as cedar. And
I always just assumed there was like a handful of cedars. I didn't reckon there was. I didn't know there was a whole bunch.
Yeah, I knew about this, but I just never really had a chance to work with it. And
I think I've worked with it once before, but not knowing what it is.
Right.
That smell of pencils came through. I had no idea what it was. But
the boards I've got are very nice and straight, and it's just milling so far through the thickness beautifully. So I've got a rush job to kind of make a couple of desktops up with it. So I'll be doing that tomorrow. I had someone interested in my chairs finally. So that's interesting. I've got a meeting in March with a retailer who's looking at them.
So not buying the kits, buying the full chairs.
He wants to look at standing order. So that's kind of what I was after. So that's interesting, but I've got meetings and such. And I just saw my emails before we went live, and a whole lot of emails behind at the moment. So that'll probably be me for couple of hours later on.
John, how about you?
This week I have been, what have I been doing? So last week I mentioned that bench seat that came through. So basically finished that in the building stage, and I have been doing a lot of quoting this week more than anything. So my stance range of table that I did a while ago has kind of started getting interest. So
cool.
So a matter of 3 days, I had 3 separate people contact me about it, wanting custom. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So so they all want it customized, and I think I have to make it more clear that it is a scalable design, and I can make it in everywhere it's kind of shown, because everyone's first question is, I really like the design, but I want it to be bigger. But,
right.
Lucky for you, I'm a furniture maker, and I can do that.
That's funny.
In terms of customizing it, you're talking about size, but not necessarily design. You wouldn't change that.
Yeah, so basically, if they want it longer, all they have to do is I'll make the aprons longer and extend the top. If they want it wider, all I do is widen the top and lengthen the shorter stretches as well. And the whole thing is that it's a scalable design.
The good thing with that is that, assumingly, you will have the base price for it, and then any modifications is extras.
Well, that's it. Like I can do the table in the same amount of time as long as the top is no wider than my wide drum set.
Right. Yeah, that's always
because that will add a day. I mean, not a full day, but maybe half a day's charge to do it. The glue up in 3 stages instead of 1.
Yeah.
So, and both of these, 2 of them wanted it custom as far as 1 meter wide, which is wider than my sander. So that added to the cost, but I think for future I'll just cop that loss because it's no harder to just do a glue up in 2 stages. But yeah,
that's true.
What else? I have also had my chopping board. So a while ago I employed a SEO company to kind of do an audit on my website and fix up the SEO, and the results are starting to show. I have had like 3-4 custom chopping board requests, and it's got me thinking that maybe I can get someone in once a week and just get them to work on nothing but blanks. So, every Thursday or every Friday, I just get a guy come in, work on blanks. So if a custom order comes in, all I do is cut it to width, glue it up, and You
get a school kid, man.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's people that are keen, so
2 hours after school.
Yeah, like I'd be happy to give someone $150 or however many hours it costs to do it. So it's better than me doing it.
In terms of what that SEO consultant did, is it quite a process for them to do it, or do you just sort of say, there it is, off you go?
So I mean, I'm using a real company, not one of these people that emails you and says, do you want to be number 1 on Google?
Which is why I'd be so nervous to do one of these things.
I've gone to an actual legitimate Australian-based company. So basically, they will get all of, like, we do a second account, and they can access the website, my Google Analytics, my Google Webmaster tools, my Bing stuff, all of online accounts. So they can monitor and do keywords, and on top of that, I specify which keywords I'd like to rank highly in. So, for example, a Perth furniture maker or wooden chopping boards or something like that. And then they do whatever needs to happen to improve the rankings on those keywords. Because, like, for me, I spend a little bit on AdWords, which is the paid ads on Google. Like $60 a month is my limit. But I don't see there any point in spending a lot of money in that sort of advertising if your name isn't organically showing as well.
Absolutely.
Like, to me, it just doesn't prove trust, because I see the ads and I scroll straight past it to the organic search term. Yeah. So it's going to end up costing about $1,400 for the 3.5 months of doing it, but it's guaranteed results. And if I'm not on the first page for all of the keywords I specified, then it's money back, sort of thing.
And that's
interesting.
3 months, and then do they just say from then on we can't tell, but you will probably still be on the first page?
Oh, I mean, if I see that there's good results and I'm getting business from it, then I would obviously continue that relationship, because $300 a month is nothing if it means it's getting 10 grand of work to you. But if it is that I'm number 1, I'm getting the clicks, but I'm not getting the work, then I know my service just isn't wanted.
Yeah.
So I just wouldn't bother with it anymore, because there's no point in having a business and not being found. Because if people can't find you, how do you know that it's you that they don't want to work, or they just can't find you? So yeah,
it was a tricky thing. I looked into it quite a lot, and essentially found out that it really has to be a constant thing, like you're going to do. They're paying someone to work on it. Probably, I imagine that it's something like once a week or something. They're going to look at your profile, and so these companies have packages going right up to that. They're going to work on it for an hour every day if you want to pay for it. But as I understand it, as soon as you stop that, it's not like it all goes away, but it does start shrinking back, and other people who are doing SEO start overtaking you. But the good thing with our industry is that there's not a heck of a lot of people doing it. So the few times I've had people look into it for myself, they're like, okay, we've done some research and we found here are your 3 competitors. So it doesn't really matter, and you're all doing such different things. You just need to be findable. And that's where I found, for me, paying for the SEO probably would be worth it, but I found that all I need is to be findable organically rather than push myself, because there's not that many people doing what I'm doing. I found I wasn't going to spend the money on it, but
it took me a while to bite the bullet. Yeah, but because I realized that 100% of my work was word of mouth, or at least very close to 100%, from people that I've worked for, getting work to me, and all that. And I really think I can be doing a lot more. And I just bit the bullet and said, I'm going to do it. Hopefully people will find me, and it means that business will start being, instead of 3 projects a month, it will go to 6 projects a month, or whatever.
Cool.
But I mean, that's all I've really been doing, a lot of quoting and computer stuff. What about you, Robin?
Well, I've been the one asking for quotes this week. I'm sort of getting full steam ahead into my bathroom renovation. So this week I've just been dealing with plumbers coming into quotes, get an idea of what I can and can't do, and how much do I want to spend. And of course I started at, this is what I want to do. I want to put in 2 toilets, move this, change this, got the first quote back and said, cool, everything's going to change. So it's sort of come back down to a more reasonable quote. We were just talking about it before the show started, about the tiling phase. So there's just, this week, all I've done is just concentrate on the process, the plan that I have to do, because I'm going to be project managing it. I need to think about and doing the building, I need to think about what step comes in front of what step. So a lot of that this week. You might have seen on Instagram, the wall outside the shop, I'm continuing work with that. I've just done some of the trim work around the door and the window. That's coming together nicely. It was quite nice to actually do a bit of woodworking with that instead of just smashing cement sheet into studs, which is, grunt work. I also met with last week I talked about a client who wanted me to make a bookshelf for her from a table or tree that she's just cut down. I actually met with her on Sunday. It was quite nice to actually meet her and get a feel for the type of person that she is and what she wants. And, it kind of broke that ice, which was nice. Got to see the tree that was cut down. While I was there, the sawyer came along and picked it up. And, so we could chat about how we wanted the actual tree cut to get the best yield. All of that. So it was, I think what I'll do in the future, and this was one of the reasons why I asked you guys last week about meeting your clients. I kind of like the idea of meeting them if it's possible. I feel like it's a good way to make that relationship. And I think it's something that I would probably try and do more in the future if I can, if it's possible.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good thing to do if time allows.
Yeah.
The other question I had for you, Rob, was how have you planned to kind of incorporate this sudden boost in renovations into your YouTube stuff? Is it an issue? Or?
When I first started my channel, it was all about DIY renovations.
Yeah.
So I planned on it. I planned on going ahead with it. Since then, I've become a little bit more clued up on what, as an Australian, what you can and can't do around the house, which, to be honest, I had some pretty cowboy videos back then, just doing whatever I wanted, not knowing. It wasn't that I was trying to be a shark. I just didn't know. So I want to include stuff, but I'll probably be a little bit more cautious about it. So like what we were talking about before the show, this tiling job that I'm talking about doing, potentially tiling over vinyl flooring. I know that if I put that video up, I'm going to get absolutely destroyed in the comments by people. So I don't know if I'm necessarily going to film that, just because it's just going to turn people away. Even though, we discussed, I've got a valid reason for it.
It's too difficult to explain.
Yeah, and I might just turn people off with that type of thing.
I agree. I would just say, and we tiled the floor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So obviously
I'll before and after photo. That's it.
Yeah. Obviously I will do I'll do sort of progress photos, and like for the vanity, I'm thinking of either doing a solid wood top, a solid slab top, or a concrete top.
Yeah, cool.
So either way, there's a video in there. So there'll be parts of it that will definitely be video. But yeah, in terms of DIY stuff, it's back to the beginning for the channel.
Yeah, I had a similar kind of feelings when I started filming my house build, and I started putting those videos together. I was very cautious about what I was filming. I wanted to make sure at least what I was showing here was right on par with what's up to code, because it is, it was going through the books. It was a legal building, and we had to follow all the rules, and we were. So I just wanted to make sure that the details that we're showing were right where they should be for where I live. And so I could see in your situation, you're going to have to kind of deal with issues that are much more complex. And so it may be easier just to say, we're just going to cut and paste some bits.
Yeah. And it was funny. I found your channel through that house build.
Okay.
And I remember watching this going, I'm going to be able to learn so much about code and what's right and what's wrong from what now obviously it's, the country is different. So the codes are slightly different.
Pretty similar, but yeah.
But there's a lot of similarities, and I was just blindly believing everything you said. So again, I wouldn't want to be just putting out rubbish onto the internet that some person's going to go ahead and just watch. So, but yeah, then having said that, at the same time, I think it's also quite educational for people to see. Who knows? Maybe in a month's time, I'll put out a video why you don't tile over vinyl flooring. That's educational.
Yeah. I thought I was going to save a heap of money, but now it's cost me 3 times as much.
I just lost 10 grand.
Yeah. So, and then the last thing that I did was I put it up on Instagram yesterday, the wireless charging bedside table, which some of you guys might have seen. I just routed a bit of a groove into that. The problem comes in at night when it's, the lights are off, it's dark, and I come to bed and my wife's sleeping next to me, and I'm trying to find the spot that it charges and boom, boom, boom every time. And that's why I just thought, nah, screw it. I'm just going to make a little dent and I can drop it straight in and off it goes.
It looks pretty good though.
Yeah.
That little recess.
It's not too bad. There's a couple of burn marks from the router bit that I just couldn't get the sandpaper in there and you
can't do it, eh?
Yeah.
That burn marks are a maker's mark. It's fine.
Just do it in the right pattern, eh?
That's it.
Yeah. So, but other than that, yeah, it actually turned out. Especially, I think one edge I used a guide, and the rest was all free-handed. Just having cut the edge with the marking knife, and it actually turned out not too bad. So I was pretty happy about that.
That's the one time when you want a set of carving chisels, and then you can just slice off the burn mark with a gouge. But yeah, my carving chisels are like a $12 set, which I'll sharpen one up every time I'm really desperate for one.
Cool. All right. Well, let's get on to the topic. And this was one that Jordan mentioned. So
I did do that.
Yeah, it's Jordan's idea. So if it sucked, no, I'm joking. So it's all about the different joinery methods. We're going to talk about, I guess, the pros and cons of different joinery methods and how they've evolved over time. It's maybe a good way.
Evolved, or where we see it fit as well would be another sort of topic to cover. To be honest, it's such a broad topic that I thought would just snowball a few ideas around and bounce it off at everyone.
Okay.
But what gave me this idea was a comment on one of our previous episodes where he was kind of asking about, do we see dominoes better than dowels and all of that sort of stuff. And I figured a really good one to cover would be pocket holes, because we are old YouTubers
Got that on my list already.
That's it. But yeah, I think the first thing I was going to talk about was the most basic of joinery, and that is edge joining boards together to make wider panels.
Right.
For me, I will rely on the glue joint entirely because long grain to long grain or edge grain to edge grain is plenty strong, but I still use either a domino if it's really thick, but now that I've actually got a good quality biscuit joiner, I've started to use biscuits more and more. And it's something I see on a lot of videos on YouTube, especially with people with dominoes. They will domino the hell out of a tabletop.
Yeah, absolutely.
And unless you're relying on that end thickness being super duper close to the thickness of those panels that you're gluing up, it seems like a big waste of money. Like dominoes are quite expensive. Biscuits, on the other hand, you get a box of 1,000 for $100, so it's nothing. But I was wondering what your guys's that's a word?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, your guys's take on edge jointing would be, or edge joining.
You take this one, Joe.
So first, I just wanted to clarify, George, that you don't domino for strength.
No, not when it's doing like a panel glue up. I wouldn't. I just do it just to keep the boards aligned. So if I'm within a tight tolerance of that end dimension.
So like you say, now that you've got a half decent biscuit joiner, you'd use that probably because you're saving a cent on the domino.
That's right.
And I used to have only a biscuit joiner, and I would do the same thing. Of course, I had a cheap one, and so actually didn't do much at all for the alignment because there was
so much play in the slot. Yeah.
So that wasn't so much good. But yeah, I only do it to keep boards aligned. And if there's a small cup or bow from end to end in a board, like if you've got a 2 meter long tabletop board, it's not necessarily going to be dead flat for a bunch of reasons. And so you can flatten it, hold it flatter with the dominoes while you're getting the clamps on. So that's the biggest reason I would use it.
Right.
Can I just jump in there? Now, I don't own a domino. I've never used one. I've obviously seen videos of it, in action. Yeah. Compared to a biscuit joiner, how far below the surface does it make the hole? Because I've used one of the dowel. You get these fairly cheap, inexpensive dowel hole jigs. And I try to do my dining table with that, and I drilled a hole into the one, and it was like 5 mil.
Nothing.
And now, fair enough, if your boards are perfectly flat, that's fine. But I looked at this and I was like, there's no way I'm going to risk seeing a dowel pop through. So threw it out.
So there's two problems with it being so close. One is it's too close, and if you if it ends up with a twist and you end up having to hand plane it flat, you run the risk of going through one if it's really close.
Call it a mistake butterfly.
Yeah. So the domino, or the small one, which I've got, goes up to 40 mil deep. I think it's 40 or 30. 30 maybe, it's 30 mil, which is decent. That's 30 mil center, I believe. But what I've heard from a lot of guys, I've never personally seen it, but if you have a domino that's quite close to the top and put glue in it, because often actually I will use my alignment dominoes will stay dry. I won't glue them because they're just holding it flat. If you put glue in that and the domino is close to the surface, because the glue expands the timber around it, you can actually see, I've been told, if you have a spray finish or a gloss finish, you can see lumps where the dominoes are, and expanding the timber above it. And so that's an interesting little insight, which I haven't personally witnessed, but I'm sure it could happen.
Yeah, I've not seen that before, but I have the XL, so I don't think it can get quite as close to the edge as the smaller one. But in regards to your question with dowels, you have a fence on it, so you can kind of adjust it. So there's like a minimum depth of probably about 5 or 6 mil to the top of the slot, and then you can adjust it down to whatever thickness you need. So I always try and center it. That's the same with the domino as well, adjustable height. And yeah, I've never had any problems with it being too close to the edge, but then again, my minimum thickness I work with on a tabletop is generally about 25, 26 mil, like minimum, so there's plenty of material there.
This particular jig didn't have an adjustment,
right.
And I think that's because it was designed for joining cabinets, so it's about lining up your 16 mil MDF.
Yeah, sure.
And I don't think it was, and which is why I ended up taking it back. I don't think it's the right thing for that, because either that or I couldn't work out how to adjust it. Because
I've seen that. You go.
Have you seen the new Triton double doweling jig Meduda, which is kind of their take on a domino, but it's a
I used to have the 909 version of that machine. It was the exact same thing. Just rebranded when 909 actually existed, and I found that the what are they called, dowels? The dowel slot for it was like too wide for even the actual proper dowels that you buy for the machine. I don't know if that was isolated to mine or not, but yeah, I was going to say regarding the dowels, you can get the jigs which are self-centering. So you kind of clamp it onto the end of your board, and with the thumb screws, it adjusts the fences independently. And those look great. I think I've used them before when I was at TAFE. And yeah, they worked really well.
But not as good as a biscuit joiner.
Well, not for that style of work. So a biscuit joiner, as long as it's not a really cheap one, so your slots are actually tight. So, for example, my Ozito one, you would have 2 millimeters of play between the boards, whereas my Makita one, I have to hammer in the biscuit. So there's a big difference. I would say
dowel. It's just really the cutter there, actually.
Well, that's true. You could probably just get a better quality cutter.
Yeah.
But when the cutter costs more than the actual Ozito biscuit cutter. But yeah. Let's see. Dowels is a good one to talk about.
Before we continue, I just want to mention, I think it's Dave, Joey, DRM, David, we were taught a rule of thumb was to make the tenon a third of the timber thickness and place it in the center of the edge of the board, which I guess would be, the safest route to go.
I guess something to think about for edge jointing before you go on to domino dowels. So traditionally, you would make either a dead flat joint or a sprung joint, and you'd put a pinch dog on each end, and you'd walk away. Like that was it. And you might put some kind of clamping majig to keep it flat in the middle. So I've got an old book from 1904 or 5-ish, and it shows techniques for this. And while they have tongue and grooves and slip feathers, which is essentially a groove on each side, and then a third piece, which is the tongue. These are their old school options for doing this, so made for using with a hand planes. Most of the time, they just resorted back to using a flat square edge with pinch dogs as their clamps, and that was it. So, all these modern majigs, they help, but not super heaps.
I think the biggest help they are is actually limiting how many clamps you need to throw at it, because you don't necessarily need to clamp it flat if you're, this is saying that you're not doing the traditional sprung joint. But you don't need to necessarily use coals on that glue up if you've got these mechanical joints in between the boards to keep it aligned. You just have to clamp it and hope that things stay flat.
Yeah, that's right.
Have you used I believe they're called finger joint edging bits with the bearing?
Once I tried.
Yeah, I've got one here, but I'm yet to find time to use it. But you see it a lot.
Yeah, I've got one, and we used it a couple of times when we first got it. My father-in-law bought it, and he's like, "Look at this awesome thing! It's this giant. I think we can get 35 mil thickness board, so we could, big beefy thing." and it's just a nightmare. It's like it's loud and noisy. It's hard to push through. And the worst thing is the alignment is terrible. You've got to do about 10 test cuts to get it lined up.
Because you got to run it like opposing faces for opposing edges, right? Yeah.
But you don't necessarily have that option if you're doing like a tabletop.
No.
Like
I find that joint useful if you're needing to join two boards together edge to edge. But
end to end.
Yeah, end to end, sorry. But I don't know. I've yet to use it, so that's why I bought it.
The thing is, if you need to run like a big bit like that across end grain, how are you holding your piece? Are you holding a router in your hand?
Yeah, it would have to be in a sled.
Yeah, you've got to make a giant.
Really.
Yeah, you've got to make a big sled up that's 2 meters long to hold your piece 90 degrees out from your cutter, which is it's just really difficult thing.
Yeah,
so.
Kickback would be fun. Yeah, cool. What were we going? Yeah, so we went on to dowels. Maybe what we could go on now is traditional versus machine joinery. So when it comes to value of a piece, would you say that if you did a traditional mortise and tenon, which was cut by hand, would that improve the value of that workpiece as opposed to a mortise and tenon cut with a dado stack in your table saw and a hollow chisel mortiser?
Go, Robin.
So we've talked about this before in one of the shows. We just touched on it briefly. My opinion, if you are using that as a feature, absolutely it adds value. But if you are just using it functionally, I cannot see any reason why you would say the good old ways are any better. Because if you can cut a better joint, a stronger joint, a better fitting joint, and you're putting together, let's say a good old standard chair, no one's looking at the chair going, wow, look at that mortise and tenon is so beautiful. They just want to make sure that the chair doesn't fall apart on them.
Yeah.
But then having said that, when you talk about drawers and you see all the different types of dovetails that you can use for drawers, then it's a different story because I know like Matt Cremona puts a lot of work into the hand cutting his dovetails because that's a feature when you pull out the drawer. Then it's maybe a different story.
Now, would you say that a machine cut dovetail, I mean like a good machine cut dovetail on one of those Lee jigs that you can configure the fingers to give you custom spacing, would you say that which is accurate and tight fitting would then be lesser value than a hand cut dovetail?
Maybe it comes down to who you're pitching it to, because for me, I want it to be some 99-year-old German man in his tiny little workshop hammering away at it. That for me, that's value.
You've got the romance with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's I can conjure up the picture and the scene, and I understand the auspiciousness of that joint. But if you were to go to IKEA and try and sell it at IKEA, bottom dollar, that comes down to. So I guess it really comes down to the person who's buying the piece.
So Jordan, have you ever had a client specifically ask you for hand cut joinery?
Never.
And in the same sentence, obviously it's going to increase the price just from labor. Do you think, because I have done this, I've said this is what it's going to cost to do this by hand, and this is what it's going to cost to do this by machine.
Yeah.
Just as an experiment. The client didn't even ask for it. And they were just like, what? I want the cheap one.
Yeah.
Just make the choice.
Because unless the client actually asks, and there's a difference between what the client wants and what the artisan wants, yes. But we kind of, we are trying to make a living from this, so we kind of have to talk about money at some point. That the client, one, never asks about joinery, even if I bring up the subject. And two, they don't care. Clients don't give a rat's how it's made. They just want this thing, and they want you to tell them it's going to last. And if you say those things, that you could just put nails in it, and as long as it does what you say it's going to do. So like I've done it on a few jobs just because I want to test myself out. Like I made a maple chest of drawers video. I think it's called a new old chest of drawers or something. That client wanted a timber chest of drawers. Wasn't really fussed on dovetailed casework or dovetailed drawers. But when I explained that I could do that, he was like, yeah, sure. And went down that road. He didn't care that I did it all by hand.
No.
But I just thought I'd give it a crack, and it worked out. And now I know I can do it. So, yeah, and I got paid. I did it. I think it took me 3 days, so it wasn't too bad. So
maybe the frustrating irony of the whole situation is that the people who want the fancy joinery are the people who are invested in doing that joinery themselves. So
I think,
you're not going to have a woodworker coming to buy your furniture, George, because they'll make it themselves. And those are the guys that want that handwork.
Exactly right. And it's a funny thing. And the reason I kind of bring it up is because I agree 100%. Client generally doesn't give a crap about how their joinery is made as long as it doesn't fall apart. They're happy. But I still have in my mind this like love of traditional joinery, except for the cost of doing it. It means I can't do it in most of my projects because people want it done cheap and quickly. But I've still got this wish list of I want to shape a dado cutter for my table saw and a hollow chisel mortiser, because it's the fastest way to get a traditional style like mortise and tenon, and I want to use that more in my projects, even though it's not the hand cut way of doing it. It just, to me, makes me feel like that project is worth more in sense of value.
A good kind of point I always kind of bring up to people when they ask me is, do you really think that if you gave a sliding panel saw to a furniture maker in 1900, do you think he would say, oh, I'm not going to use that, I'm going to do it with this hand saw I've got?
No, they would jump on it.
They would jump on it because what they're trying to do is pump out as many pieces of furniture in that month as they can, which is probably one, and get paid for it. When you look at there's a good article in Mortise and Tenon magazine about this, about an old, I think it is a workshop from 1700 in the States, and they found some of the old docket books going out, and they could see that this guy is just pumping out stuff. The work quality depended on what was being made, but generally it was just kind of so-so work. It's from my memory of the article. And they kind of gathered that, this guy could make very good furniture, but people were only willing to pay what they were willing to pay. So this is what the quality of the work was. And we're talking about the exact same thing. And so it's all about, everything comes down to speed. And you really, unless somebody is asking for it specifically, the joinery is going to be the fastest and most practical for that purpose. And what you have on board, what machines have you got that you can alter or use in a slightly different way to get a different result?
No, totally. How do I respond?
I must say, for me personally, when I look at any of my joinery, and I obviously haven't got to the stage of you guys having done hundreds and hundreds of the same joints, but for me, regardless of whether I'm using my hands or I'm using a tool or whatever I'm using, a blunt spoon, when I get a clean line on a glue joint, doesn't matter. That makes me happy. Yep. Bottom line.
Yeah, that is never going to change either. That will always make you happy. Well, at least for me. Speaking of real joinery, pocket holes, are they real? Or are they what? Do they have a place in furniture? I think they got a beautiful place in casework.
I think Joey, this ties in perfectly to what you were just saying. In 50 years' time, we'll be... Oh, no, actually, no. Let's go 50 years back. If you were to show someone a pocket hole jig 50 years ago, would they say no to it? No, of course they wouldn't, because it's going to speed things up. Why do people have nails? Why do people still have this feeling about pocket holes that it's so weird? It's like pocket holes have transcended the hand tool, machine tool argument, and they're just on their own up there in this. I don't understand the hate for pocket holes. I just don't think it's relevant.
Well, personally, I don't think I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna put my foot in my mouth. I don't think they have a place in fine furniture. But that said, I don't see how they differ from a domino. Like, it's essentially closing the same joint, except it's using a screw which is in a weird pocket that you can achieve by just using a standard drill. But you need to spend $200 on the jig.
No, you can hide it better with pocket holes.
You can, but for me, I don't think it should be used in furniture. I think in casework, where you can actually strategically place them, they are beneficial, but I don't think they're any better than using staples, if that's the sort of casework you're doing.
Okay.
Yeah, you go. Save me.
Yeah, I've got issues to talk about. Okay, so from reading about the pocket holes, their whole thing is about screwing into edge or long grain instead of end grain when you're doing like a butt 90-degree corner joint. That's the whole purpose, it makes sense to me in solid timber. So I just wouldn't screw solid timber like that generally 90% of the time. It's not going to happen. Yeah. So then I say, okay, it's like at the moment I'm building a plywood kitchen. It's got no grain directionality. It doesn't matter how I screw them together. It's going to be some edge grain, some long grain, some end grain. There's a mix of both. So the whole point of the pocket hole is pointless. So just screw it together right through the piece. And then I just saved myself $150. I just had a drill bit. I don't like when people make carcass work with the pocket holes because they're huge holes. It's a 10 mil hole or 8 mil, I think it is. It's an 8 mil hole. And yeah, generally they're hidden on the inside of the carcasses. But that's where you're going to put your pots and pans and stuff. Like you see that stuff. Why not to screw through the outside of the carcass right through from the back or the side or the top, and you've got no screw holes visible. Yeah, inside.
90% of cabinet shops just use staples and go straight through the edge. Yeah. At least over in this side of the pond, they just use long gauge staples, and that.
I don't agree that staples are the same as screws, but I see why they do it because it's quick as, and if they glue it, then you're getting a bit more holding power. A screw, you got to think, like my dad always said, you got to think of a screw as a clamp. That's what it is, the way it's working. And so if you think about when you screw a box together, you've just put kind of 20 clamps onto it, and that's pretty strong. A staple is just relying on friction. And especially in plywood, if that staple happens to be going into the end grain of the plywood, of a plywood veneer, you've got just about no holding power as soon as you put some racking force on that.
Yeah, that's true.
So pocket holes for me are useful only for adding the holes for screwing down a top or something.
Yeah,
in like a table frame, like it
creates useful. Yeah,
create a pocket, which is great, and you can put the screw in there. That's a good use for it. I don't like the idea of screwing two boards together, but like on edge, like for a tabletop. I know it can be done, and you look on the underside of it, even though not many people do, and you just see like wormholes of 8 mil holes.
Yeah,
it's like, okay, that's kind of weird. Like, just put glue in there. Like, why did you screw it together? I don't know. So,
I think Cuffy's summed it up pretty well.
Yeah,
pocket holes are considered bad because they're used in the wrong situations far too often. Which, maybe, and I guess that follows on from what you've said, John, about in furniture. Yeah, maybe in fine furniture, not the way to go. In the same way that you generally wouldn't use screws at all in fine furniture. But for me, cabinet making or carcass making, if you don't see them, I think power to you. I can't see a negative in it.
the thing I do like about pocket holes, and I will say is awesome, is that it means that someone in their workshop that just has a miter saw and whatever, handful of tools, they can get out there and they can assemble a table in an afternoon. Like, it's sped up that entire process for hobbyists that are just doing it for the joy of it, and I like that. But it does, when people start relying on it for everything, I believe it becomes a very limiting tool. As in,
that sounds
limiting yourself. Dominoes. Well, and exactly the same as dominoes. If you're relying on dominoes and everything, you're limiting yourself to that. But
yeah, absolutely. And I think that might be why someone like myself leans towards pocket holes more, because I'm probably just moving out of that hobbyist side of things now, to get to the more professional woodworking. But I'm still very much, in my mind, I'm still just a dude with a miter saw in a garage. So for me, pocket holes still have a place because of that.
Yeah.
I think I'm just thinking about the carcass part of it again. And so I've got one of those tiny little Krieg pocket hole things, which I use once a year. And I've got a little box of screws. And so as far as I understand, when you're screwing 18 mil panels together, you have to use a 32 mil screw, which makes sense because it's won't go all the way through the other piece. So you're getting about 16 mil of holding power towards the end of the screw. If that makes any sense, because the screw tapers off, so you don't get the full amount because the pointy end of the screw isn't grabbing anymore. Yep. So when I screw carcasses together, I use 45 mil screws and go right through. So you're getting almost 30 mil of holding into the second piece. I think there's a lot more holding power in that, and this is going to come down to a debate of like how strong the screw.
How long is a piece of rope?
Yeah, the more threads that are in, the stronger it's going to be. Is really what it comes down to. So I just don't see them as being as effectively strong in some situations either.
Yeah,
and I must say, if they did some real research, whatever, on it, and it did turn out that pocket holes were vastly inferior, then obviously I'd change my tune. I've never actually used pocket holes before, so I'm only going on the opinions and what I've seen online.
Yeah.
My argument is more with the people who seem to just dislike them because they are pocket holes.
I just feel like they're unnecessary, to be honest, because you just put a screw in with a drill. Like, maybe I'm just too old school about it, but just like line the two pieces up and put a drill in there. Like, why do you need a jig and all this stuff to hold it? Just do it.
Complicating something that has been done by people for many years.
I think it comes down to the design of the cabinet more than the tool. If you're designing a cabinet where you only can put a screw in this one hidden place, then maybe it's actually the design of the cabinet and there's not enough thought about how it's going to go together properly. So...
All right, so
the obligatory pocket hole conversation, which was bound to come up, has been just ticked off.
That's been it. Let's check. Maybe while we're still kind of going on this whole casework thing, rebates and dados or screws, like just butt joints, or have it rebated. For me, I used to rebate. Like if I was doing any casework, I'd do the rebates and dados for everything. But of late, I've just started doing butt joints, screws, glue, and relying on that because it's plenty strong for what it needs to do, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But I'm also not selling this stuff. Everything I do casework is generally for myself or for my house.
It depends what it is for. I like in a kitchen. If I not very often I actually screw a shelf in these days because everything's sitting on adjustable pins, which is essentially just a screw when you think about it. Anyway, so if people accept a shelf pin, they should accept screws. I mean, the difference is that the screw is halfway through the thickness of the shelf, and so you have half of the strength of the timber can split away, if that makes any sense.
Yep.
Yeah, I tend to, like, if it's a bookcase, I definitely am going to put some extra duty, either dominoes and then screw. So the screw will hold the case together and the dominoes are taking the weight.
Sure.
Something like that. If I can, I'll do dados, but I don't like to see, like on a bookcase, personally, I don't like seeing the dado and the shelf inside that groove.
Yeah, but you need a face frame or
so
stop groove.
Yeah, and so face frames are very not popular here, and people usually want big, chunky, thick verticals and square edges, and so there's some playing around to do.
That bedside table that I did a couple of weeks ago, there the plywood's all rebated in, and I thought it looked pretty cool. Like, I like that you can see the notch where it comes out, and maybe it's a bit different. It's made up with the plies, so it's more attractive maybe.
Rebates in a corner is fine, but like a shelf sitting in a groove, to me, it just looks a bit kind of unfinished.
Okay.
It's like anything. You can make it a feature or you can try and hide it. And it's how you choose to, like, polish it off that will make it. Because if it's if it's heaps of plies going into a rebate, like birch ply, I think that could look kind of cool seeing it all put in. But if it's just cheap, like MDF, and it's, you can see it separating the slight glue line or in the paint, it just it doesn't look great in most cases. Okay, well, we've been going on for a while.
I've one question. Sorry, John, did you have any more points?
No, I mean, we haven't talked about half laps and cross lap kind of joints, which is what you used in your table, and that's if there was anything that you guys thought about off the suggestion we could talk about, but I haven't really got anything specific to say.
I don't know. What were you going to say, Robin?
I wanted to talk about gluing end grain, because I know that there's a lot of, well, I think it's pretty universally known that it's a no-no and not a very strong joint. Steve Ramsey has once said you can get away with it by gluing the end grain, sort of filling it with glue so that it seals up a bit, then you glue it to whatever, you get a bit more strength there. As much as gluing end grain is a weak joint, there is still some strength in it. So do you guys ever use gluing end grain maybe temporarily, or do you ever rely on it?
Go on, Joey.
I can't think of anything where I've just said, right, this is a glued butt joint, and I'm going to walk away from it. Like my table is probably the worst example. So there's some very long, not it wouldn't be considered end grain. Technically, it'd be very short grain, they would say. And it's got dominoes in it. And then there's that center kind of cross section, which is straight up end grained. But there's a big tenon in there, domino. So that's holding it. I don't think I've ever... the only time I've done a butt join that I can think of is where you need to join a plank in the middle of a tabletop or bench top. And you do it in the middle of a stack of boards. But it's held in place by the boards around it. So it's not such an issue.
See, that case I've seen, I think it's Canadian Woodworks on Instagram. They do, like, the shorts. They laminate all the shorts and they use dominoes in all the end grain. And, like, to me, it's not strong enough for that. If it's supported on each side, great. But that's what that finger joint router bit that I was talking about earlier is basically designed for. It gives you long grain, well, it's really short grain, but long grain connections on an end grain glue joint because you're cutting into it. So if it's something that I have to do, that's the reason I bought that router bit for me personally, is that I have a way of joining it.
I'm not sure about where you guys are, but here, like at a hardware store, you can get it. Just about any type of timber comes in a finger jointed version where they're just picking up all the scraps from the factory and joining them back together. And I've never seen one just fall apart. I've never
but then
seen
it's also running on the.
I mean, I've made theatre flats, 8 to 12 meter tall flats using finger jointed strong backs. And these weigh 800 kilos, some of them, and they're perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Are you talking? Sorry, Joey. Are you talking about the lengths of timber, not the bench tops?
No, the lengths of you might get like a piece of 150 by 20, and it's 6 meters long, perfectly dressed, and there's like every 200 mil there's a new block.
Yeah.
And you can hold that in the middle and shake it, and it's not just going to fall into 100 bits. And that stuff, yes, it's got a finger joint, but it's still fully a butt joint, end grain to end grain. And it's amazing how strong that stuff is. Yes, they're using very good epoxy, but it still is what it is.
Cool. All right. John, was there anything else on it?
Cool. I mean, no, not really. I think we covered everything.
We hashed it out.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well,
is there any questions?
Yes, we do have questions. Thank you for reminding me. All right. So we had one from Trent Baldwin earlier. He was the first one. Thinking of getting a cabinet scraper. What is your experience with these? I'll start this off by saying I was pretty underwhelmed, if I'm honest. I don't know if I just haven't sharpened it or, put the what is it? The burr?
Burr.
Yeah, whatever it's called. I used it for a while. It was pretty cool. I then it went blunt. I tried to put another burr on, and it's never been as sharp as when I got it. And I've used it on epoxy a little bit, dry epoxy, and it was pretty cool.
It's pretty good on epoxy.
Yeah, I don't know. I found I reached to sandpaper much quicker.
Have you got a proper burnisher for it?
No, right? So I've been trying to use a screwdriver.
No, don't do that. I mean, you can do that. But if it's a good quality card scraper, it's going to be just as hard, if not harder, as your chrome moly screwdriver plated handle. You're not going to get the same finish. So, as in, you're not going to get the same good put onto it. Because I started just like you with using my screwdriver, and it was terrible. Like what I would suggest, if you're going in looking for one into a shop, take in your pocket a little screwdriver and run it down the edge while the store man isn't looking, and see if it marks your screwdriver. Because if it can mark your screwdriver, it's a hard enough steel to give you a good edge.
Or do it in front of him and just see what his reaction is, because
you just bought a scraper. Man, I'm gonna say. Sorry, carry on, Jordan.
I was just going to say, I don't use the handheld one very often anymore. I've got the Veritas actual cabinet scraper in the handle thing. Yeah, the plane. And that thing I use all the time for mostly epoxy. I don't get a finish-ready surface off it, but that is all because I don't put the time into actually honing that thing up to a merit edge and then putting the burr on it and all that jazz. It just takes a long time to tune it.
I'll try and be quick because I see we've got some other questions. I'm going to say that it's all about results for me, so I do not care how I go about sharpening that thing. So I'm going to be sacrilegious and tell you all how I do it. I have tried the proper way and it works okay, but I tell you the best way: that throw the cabinet scraper in a vise, get a flat file, and hold it flat like you would with the burnisher, but don't add an angle. Just file straight down, square across it. 3 passes, that's going to have the biggest burr you've ever seen on it, and it's going to last all day, and you don't have to keep going back.
I must say, I did try that. I'd flipped my belt stander upside down, put a 36 belt on, and ran it across perpendicular to that to try and get a burr, and that wasn't too bad.
That's the best way. I mean, that thing will stay sharp.
That would be great if you're using it for just roughing.
No, man, I get a really good finish of it. It just makes a perfectly good burr. And I know people are going to say, the burr's uneven and rah. Well, come try it. Do it. Okay. And then tell me how bad it is. Because I tell you, I get a good finish. I get a glossy finish off a table if I finish that way.
Yeah, right.
We've got another one from Gareth who wants to know, when you get Joey, what is and where do you get that epoxy you use for your outdoor furniture?
It's the epoxy I use for everything. When I use epoxy, it's called Builder's Glue for some reason by CRC.
Real creative.
Yep. CRC make it, and they just bought out somebody else. And so now they've changed the labeling God, I can't remember the other company, but it still says CRC on it. It's 1-to-1. It's nice and thick stuff. Everyone, you've probably seen how thick it is. It's awesome. You get about an hour working time depending how hot it is, and it's awesome. But it's a bit expensive. It's like $50 for half a liter or quarter of a liter.
I'd say it's just for the Aussie listeners. I'd say it's the same stuff that they sell at boatpaints.com.au. It's like it looks the exact same on your videos as it is here, and it's just their boat epoxy, and it's about the same price, $50 for the 2 tins.
Yep.
And that's cheaper than West Systems.
Yeah, but you got to mix it up in big quantities, so it doesn't last quite as long. But at least the few times I've used it, didn't last quite as long.
Yeah, you always have a big load, Joe, when you're working with yours. I always see it's quite a...
Yeah, I usually usually end up finding myself making a second batch. It's amazing how much glue you go through, actually.
Yeah, because you're using it for joinery, not just for filling. So, I guess,
That's right.
All right, then the last one, Jason said... do you have plans for more business-related stuff? It was really helpful hearing about your tax business pricing topics for a new maker that was actually relevant to hear. Absolutely, Jason.
What do you want to hear?
Yeah, well, that's it. I think we didn't necessarily plan on this, but one of the topics that we keep talking about and keep saying this will make another video is the business side of stuff. So, yeah, if you've got any ideas, shoot us an email. The Facebook page, the Shop Stool Podcast, there'll be a link below. Feel free to leave a question there. But to answer your question, absolutely.
Could I also say, if you've got ideas for like topics and other topics mostly, you should head over to our Facebook page and leave it on the page there, because each week it becomes harder and harder to come up with a topic. There's only 3 of us, so it only takes. It comes around quickly.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, the Facebook page is where it's good. Or you can reach out to us directly, as you were saying earlier, Joe.
Yeah. Just go to any of our socials and give us a message.
Yeah. All right, in terms of what we've been watching, I will start this one off. So Andrew Klein, I don't know if you guys watch him. I think he's got an engineering background, but he's a woodworker as well. So it was him, Mark Spagnuolo, and I think there was another person. They did the threaded taps. So he's got that whole like engineering, manufacturing, that sort of vibe. Anyway, he came up with a workbench design that I think he's talking about potentially patenting, where the legs are steel, square tube steel, and then you fill it with sand. So it's got this really low center of gravity.
I've seen that.
Super cool idea. Like, I mean, it's pretty obvious when you think about it. But it's cool to see someone like that, not only just saying like, I'm going to make a workbench and fill it with sand. It was, I'm going to make a workbench. I'm going to plan it. I'm going to potentially sell this to someone, manufacture it, yada, yada, yada. And he did a video on the bench, and it looks like an absolute beast. So Andrew Klein, I think if you just search Andrew Klein workbench, you'll come up with it, but there will be links in the description after the show. Jordan, how about you?
It's been not a huge amount of watching this week, but this morning Winston Moy did put out a new video. He's a CNC guy.
Winston Moy.
But he was making these acrylic, wooden, brass, I think, awards. And I mean, he's cool. He's an engineer, so straight down the line sort of delivery, which is what I like. But yeah, he's a good channel. I've been following him for probably the best part of the year now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Joey, anything?
I just had a quick look on my history, and I've been watching a few things I haven't had a chance to watch. It's not been making. It's been skateboarding crashes. So
I've got this new Instagram following account, which is it sounds terrible when you say it out loud. Kids getting hurt. And it's just video of kids falling over and skateboard crashes and stuff.
Awesome. I must say I heard a someone say the other day. The main reason the ATV was invented was so Fail Army have some content. Cool. All right. I just want to make one more mention of the Malini, or someone corrected me the other day. I think it's Marlini. That's how you're supposed to say it. Sure. Wood Expo coming up in May. The three of us will be doing a talk there on the Saturday. We're also planning on doing a meetup, but we'll get into more details as we get closer. I just want to keep reminding you guys, if you feel like coming up to Queensland and hanging out or seeing a very cool show, I would definitely recommend it.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
All right. Other than that, thank you very much for listening, everybody. If you do have any questions or comments that you want to add about the show, as we said earlier, feel free to reach out to us or have a look at the Facebook page, which is facebook.com/shopstoolpodcast. If you are watching on iTunes, a review is always very much appreciated. But other than that, anything else from you guys before we go?
Nope.
I'm what good. He said.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks again for listening, everybody. And we'll see you again same time next Thursday.
Yeah.
Bye.